Jonah Whittaker had already killed the engine when Serena Lockwood ran out of her own wedding. He had done his job, delivered the bride to the glass doors of the Montclair estate, watched her disappear into that cathedral of white flowers and string quartets. His contract was complete. Then he heard shouting from inside, muffled but urgent, and the glass doors burst open. Serena came sprinting toward his car, her gown tangled around her legs, mascara already streaking her face. She yanked open the back door and threw herself inside. "Please," she gasped, "just drive." Jonah had a choice to make and about 3 seconds to make it. He made it in 2. The Lincoln pulled away from the estate with a smoothness that betrayed nothing of what was happening inside it. Jonah kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady at 10 and 2, his breathing deliberately slow. In the rearview mirror, he could see the men stopping at the edge of the circular driveway, one of them already reaching for a phone. He took the first right turn he saw, then another, threading the car through a neighborhood of old oaks and iron fences, before emerging onto a county road that led away from everything. Serena sat in the back seat without speaking. Her wedding dress filled the space around her like a collapsed parachute. All that white silk and beading now crushed against leather upholstery. She was staring out the window, but Jonah doubted she was seeing anything. Her hands were shaking in her lap, the diamond ring on her finger catching what remained of the afternoon light. Everyone in Connecticut knew the Lockwood name, knew the glass towers downtown that bore it, knew the foundation galas and the society pages and the particular kind of wealth that came with being old money in a new money world. Serena Lockwood was supposed to marry Harrison Vale this afternoon, uniting 2 families whose combined net worth could buy a small country. Jonah had read about it in the paper 3 weeks ago when he got the contract. The wedding of the decade. They had called it a merger disguised as a marriage. Now he was driving her away from it, and he did not know why. The county road gave way to a state highway. Jonah stayed in the right lane, kept the speedometer exactly at the limit. Nothing to attract attention, nothing to remember. He took an exit that led to smaller roads, older roads, the kind that wound through farmland and forgotten towns where people minded their own business. The afternoon sun was getting lower, turning everything gold and amber, and the shadows of the trees stretched long across the pavement. 20 minutes passed before Serena spoke. "I could not do it," she said. Her voice was hollow, like she had been screaming before she ran. "I got to the doors of the ceremony room, and I could see him standing there at the altar, and I could not make myself walk through. My legs just stopped working. My whole body refused." Jonah adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. He had been a driver for 11 years. He had driven brides and grooms, executives and politicians, grieving families and celebrating ones. He had learned that silence was usually more valuable than words, that people who needed to talk would talk whether you encouraged them or not. "You can let me out anywhere," Serena continued. "I will figure something out. I just needed to get away from there. Away from all of them, away from the cameras and the guests and my father standing in the front row looking at me like I was a stock he had invested in." Jonah glanced at the rearview mirror. The road behind them was empty, but that did not mean anything. People like the Lockwoods did not let things go easily. They had resources, connections, the kind of reach that could find anyone anywhere. "Are you hurt?" he asked. It was the first thing he had said since they left. "No, just terrified." He nodded slowly. Terrified he could work with. Terrified meant she was still thinking clearly enough to know she should be scared. He checked his mirrors again, then took another turn onto an even smaller road. They were in farm country now, silos and cornfields, and the occasional white farmhouse with pickup trucks parked in the driveways. "I am not taking you anywhere specific," he said. "Just away, that is enough." They drove in silence for another 10 minutes. Jonah found himself thinking about his daughter, about Nora waiting at home with the babysitter, about how he was supposed to be back by 6 to make dinner. He was already going to be late. He was already going to have to explain something he did not understand himself. He thought about the small house they shared, the refrigerator covered in her drawings, the bedtime stories he read every night. His whole life fit in that house. Everything that mattered. The wedding. Serena said suddenly. It was not my choice. Jonah waited. None of it was my choice. The venue, the dress, the guest list, the groom. She laughed, but there was no humor in it, especially the groom. Harrison Vale was selected for me. The way you might select a stock for a portfolio. Good returns, acceptable risk, strategic value. His family owns media companies. My family owns real estate and manufacturing. Together, we would be unstoppable. That was the pitch. Anyway, she leaned her head against the window. Her reflection looked back at her, hollow-eyed and exhausted. I have been the CEO of Lockwood Industries for 4 years. I have made decisions that affected thousands of people, hundreds of millions of dollars. I have sat across the table from senators and foreign ministers and negotiated deals that changed entire industries. But I was not allowed to decide who I would spend my life with. That choice belonged to my father. Jonah processed this in silence. He had driven for wealthy families before. He knew how power worked in those circles, knew that marriages were often mergers by another name, that love was frequently a luxury the rich could not afford. But hearing it from someone who had just fled her own wedding made it real in a way that numbers on a balance sheet never could. I am not asking you to understand, Serena said. I am just telling you why I ran. Because if I had walked through those doors, I would have become someone else entirely. Someone who does not exist yet. Someone I do not want to be, and I was not ready to let that happen. Jonah checked his mirrors again, still empty. You could have said no before today, he said carefully. Could I? She turned to look at the back of his head. Do you know what happens when a Lockwood says no? When a woman in my position refuses what her family has arranged, the pressure does not stop. It escalates. It becomes your mother crying in your office every morning. Your father threatening to remove you from the company your grandfather built. Your siblings calling you selfish, ungrateful, destructive, saying you are tearing the family apart. She paused. I said no for 2 years. They just stopped hearing it. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. They passed a small town, just a gas station and a diner, and a church with a white steeple. Jonah thought about pulling over, about ending this here, about walking away from whatever he had stumbled into, but he kept driving. Something in him refused to stop. You can stop whenever you want, Serena said, as if reading his thoughts. I know this is not your problem. I know you finished your job hours ago. You delivered me to the venue. Your contract was complete. Everything after that has been your choice. He adjusted the mirror so he could see her face. I will stop when you tell me where you want to go. She did not answer. Maybe she did not know. Maybe no one had ever asked her that question before. They were 40 miles from the Montclair estate when Jonah first noticed the headlights. They appeared in his mirror like eyes opening in the dark, too far back to identify, but too consistent to ignore. He watched them for 5 miles, then 10. They maintained the same distance, never gaining, never falling behind. Professional pursuit. Someone who knew what they were doing. We are being followed, he said. Serena did not turn around. I know. Jonah's jaw tightened. He had hoped it would take them longer to organize, longer to trace his route. But the Lockwoods had resources he could not imagine. Security teams and private investigators and technology that could track a car from a satellite. They probably had his GPS data before he even left the county. I can lose them, he said. Maybe you do not have to do this, Serena replied. None of this is your responsibility, but he was already accelerating. already taking the next turn onto a road that barely qualified as paved. The Lincoln bounced over potholes and gravel, its suspension protesting, its headlights cutting through darkness that seemed absolute. Behind them, the following car hesitated, then turned to pursue. Jonah drove the way he had learned to drive 20 years ago on roads just like this one, back when he was a teenager with more courage than sense. He knew how to take a corner without braking, how to read the shadows for hidden driveways, how to disappear into the landscape. The car behind them fell back, lost the rhythm, made a wrong turn somewhere in the maze of county roads that all looked the same in the dark. When they finally emerged onto a main highway, there was no one behind them. Serena let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for miles. "Where did you learn to do that?" Jonah almost smiled. "I grew up around here. Different county, but same kind of roads. Used to race my friends on Friday nights when we were too young to know better." He paused. "Stupid thing to do. Could have killed ourselves, but useful now." "Useful now," he agreed. They drove in silence for a while longer. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its place. Jonah could feel it in his shoulders, in the tightness of his hands on the wheel, in the way his eyes kept wanting to close. He needed to stop soon, needed to think, needed to figure out what happened next. But more than that, he needed to understand what he had gotten himself into and whether there was any way out. The news broke within the hour. Jonah heard it on the radio first, a breaking story about chaos at the Lockwood Vale wedding. The bride had vanished minutes before the ceremony. Security footage showed her fleeing to a waiting car, a black Lincoln driven by an unidentified man. The family was offering no comment, but sources close to the situation described the scene as unprecedented, devastating, a scandal of historic proportions. The Vale family was reportedly furious. Guests were being interviewed by reporters and police. The story was everywhere, spreading faster than they could drive. Serena listened without expression. "They will find your name soon," she said. "The car is registered to your company. It will take them an hour, maybe 2. Jonah turned off the radio. "I know." He pulled into a rest stop, parked in the shadow of an 18-wheeler, killed the engine. For a moment, they just sat there, two strangers in a car that had become evidence, breathing the same air, wondering how they had ended up here. "I should not have asked you to drive," Serena said quietly. "I was panicking. I was not thinking about what it would cost you. I just saw your car and I ran." "You did not ask," Jonah replied. "You said please. That is different." She looked at him in the rearview mirror. "How is it different?" He considered the question. Asking is what people do when they have options. Please is what they say when they are desperate. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just a few trucks and a sedan with out-of-state plates. Somewhere nearby, a dog was barking. The normalcy of it felt surreal, like they had driven into a different world where weddings and scandals and billionaire families did not exist. "What happens now?" Serena asked. Jonah did not have an answer. What happened now was that his name would be in the news by morning connected to one of the biggest scandals of the year. What happened now was that the Lockwood family would make his life very difficult, possibly impossible. What happened now was that he had to go home to his daughter and explain why her father had become the man who helped a billionaire escape her wedding. "I should turn myself in," he said finally. "Call the police, explain what happened, let them sort it out." "They will not sort it out," Serena replied. "They will do whatever my father tells them to do. Edmund Lockwood does not lose control of situations. He manages them. And right now, managing this situation means making you responsible for everything. You will be the kidnapper, the opportunist, the man who took advantage of a vulnerable woman." Jonah absorbed this. He thought about Nora, about the custody arrangement with his ex-wife, about how fragile his life already was before today. One wrong move and he could lose everything. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you do?" "I do not know." She pulled at a thread on her wedding dress, watched it unravel. "I have never done this before, made a choice that could not be undone. Every other decision in my life has had an escape clause, a way to go back if things went wrong. This one does not." The dog stopped barking. The silence felt heavy. "I have a house," Jonah said slowly, the words coming before he could stop them. "Outside of town. It is small, nothing special, but it is mine. If you need somewhere to stay while you figure things out, you could stay there just until you know what you want to do." Serena stared at him. "You do not know me. No, you do not owe me anything." "No." "Then why would you offer that?" Jonah looked out at the empty parking lot, at the darkness beyond the lights, at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. "Because you asked for help," he said. "And I was raised to believe that means something." Lucas Wren made the first call the next morning. Jonah was in his kitchen making coffee with hands that still felt unsteady when his phone lit up with an unknown number. He let it ring twice before answering, already knowing it would be trouble. Mr. Whitaker. The voice was smooth, professional, the voice of someone accustomed to getting what they wanted. "My name is Lucas Wren. I represent the Lockwood family. I figured then you understand why I am calling. We need to resolve this situation quickly and quietly. Serena has made some impulsive choices, but her family is prepared to welcome her home without consequences. All we need is her location." Jonah poured his coffee, added sugar, stirred it slowly, "And if I do not know her location, Mr. Whitaker." A hint of steel entered Wren's voice. "Let me be direct. Your involvement in yesterday's events has been documented. Traffic cameras, witness statements, your vehicle's GPS. We know you drove Miss Lockwood away from the venue. We know you did so after your contracted services had ended. That creates certain legal ambiguities. Questions about consent, about intent, about whether a driver with your history should continue to hold a commercial license." Wren paused for effect. "I am sure you understand that the Lockwood family has considerable resources. They would prefer to use those resources constructively to help Serena and to compensate you for your trouble, but they are also prepared to use them defensively." Jonah took a sip of his coffee. It was too hot, burned his tongue. "Is that a threat?" "It is information, Mr. Whitaker. What you do with it is your choice." The call ended. Jonah stood in his kitchen for a long time, holding his phone, thinking about the woman upstairs in his daughter's bedroom, wearing borrowed clothes and trying to figure out how to be a person without a name. He thought about what Wren had said, about legal ambiguities and considerable resources. He thought about Nora and what would happen to her if her father went to prison for something he did not do. He should tell Serena to leave. He should protect himself and Nora from whatever was coming. He should do the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing that anyone with any sense would do. He made 2 cups of coffee instead. Serena came downstairs just as Nora was finishing her breakfast. The 7-year-old looked up from her cereal, studied the stranger with the serious eyes children reserve for people they are not sure about yet. She took in the borrowed clothes, the tired face, the way this woman held herself like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. "This is Serena," Jonah said carefully. "She is going to stay with us for a little while." Nora considered this. "Does she like pancakes?" Serena blinked. "I do not know. I have never really had them." Nora's eyes widened with the particular horror of a child confronting an unimaginable injustice. "Never. My family was more of a French toast household, very formal breakfasts, nothing you eat with your hands." Nora looked at her father with an expression of profound concern. "Daddy, we have to help her." Jonah laughed, surprising himself. I think we do. They made pancakes together. The three of them crowded into a kitchen designed for two. Nora appointed herself head of batter supervision, which mostly meant preventing Serena from overstirring. Jonah handled the griddle, flipping cakes with a practiced motion, while Serena watched like she was trying to memorize the technique. It was strange, domestic, completely surreal. 12 hours ago, this woman had been about to marry into one of the wealthiest families in America. Now she was standing in his kitchen wearing his old Yale sweatshirt, learning how to tell when a pancake was ready to flip. You look for the bubbles, Nora explained patiently. When they pop and do not fill back in, that means it is time. Serena nodded solemnly. Bubbles, pop, flip, got it. You are going to be okay at this, Nora declared. It just takes practice. Later, after Nora had left for school and the kitchen was clean, Serena sat at the table with her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. The morning light came through the window and made everything look softer than it had the night before. She is wonderful, she said quietly. Your daughter. She is the best thing I have ever done. Serena was quiet for a moment. I do not know how to be a person who makes pancakes, who has a daughter, who lives in a house without security cameras and personal assistants and people telling you what to do every minute of every day. You learn, Jonah said. Same way you learned whatever you do at Lockwood Industries. One thing at a time. Nobody is born knowing how to flip pancakes. She looked up at him. I received a message from my father this morning. He says, I have 48 hours to come home or I will be removed from the company entirely, stripped of my position, my shares, my access to everything I have built. Jonah waited. He says, I am being selfish. Serena continued, that I am destroying the family for personal reasons, that Harrison Vale is already preparing a defamation lawsuit, that our stock price has dropped 3% since yesterday. She sat down her cup. Lucas Wren has been calling every hour. He says they know I am with you. He says you are going to lose everything if you do not give me up. I know, and you are still here. It was not really a question, but Jonah answered it anyway. I spent 11 years driving other people to their destinations, he said, taking them where they needed to go, then going home like nothing happened. He looked out the window at the small backyard where Nora's swing set stood, rusting slightly. I do not know where you need to go, but I know you are not done figuring that out, and I am not going to make that harder. Serena studied him with an expression he could not read. You could be arrested. You could lose custody of your daughter. You could lose everything you have worked for. Probably. Why? He considered the question for a long moment. Because you ran, he said finally. When everything was in place, when you could have just gone through with it and had a comfortable life forever, you ran. That takes courage. And I think courage deserves a chance to figure out what comes next. The ultimatum arrived by courier that afternoon. Jonah watched from the window as a black car pulled up, discouraged a man in a gray suit, delivered an envelope to his mailbox. Official correspondence from the law offices of Wren and Associates. Inside was a letter explaining in precise legal language exactly how his life would be dismantled if he did not cooperate. His commercial driver's license was under review, pending investigation of alleged unlawful transport. His employment contract with the wedding service had been terminated, effective immediately. His landlord had received notice that any property harboring a fugitive could be subject to legal action. His custody arrangement could be reconsidered given his association with criminal activity. There was also an offer $100,000, wired to any account of his choosing in exchange for Serena's location, and his signed statement that he had acted entirely alone. Jonah read the letter 3 times, then set it on the kitchen table. Serena found it an hour later. They are going to destroy you, she said. Her voice was flat, drained. I cannot let that happen. It is not your decision." "Of course it is." She turned to face him. "You helped me because I asked, because you believed I deserved a chance to figure out my life. How can I let you lose yours?" Jonah walked to the window again, looked out at the empty street. "What will you do if you go back? What I have always done. What I was raised to do." She joined him at the window. "I will marry Harrison Vale. I will run the company the way my father wants. I will have the life that was chosen for me, and you will be miserable. I have been miserable before. At least this way, no one else suffers for it." Jonah turned to look at her. In the afternoon light, she looked different than she had in the car. Less afraid, more defeated. Like someone who had tasted freedom and was preparing to give it up. "What do you want?" he asked. She did not answer immediately. The question seemed to catch her off guard, like no one had ever asked it before, like it had never occurred to anyone that what she wanted might matter. "I want to know what it feels like to choose," she said finally. "Just once, to make a decision that is entirely mine, with no pressure and no consequences for anyone but myself. Then do it." She stared at him. "Do what?" "Choose right now." He gestured at the letter on the table. "That is one option. Go back, Mary Vale. Be what they want you to be. But there are other options too. You could walk out that door and disappear. Start over somewhere no one knows your name. You could fight your father publicly. Tell the world what happened. Let them see who he really is." He paused. "Or you could stay here. Figure out what you want your life to look like when you are the one designing it. And when you know, you can go build it." Serena was quiet for a long moment. "If I stay, they will come for you. Probably they will take everything. Maybe. Why would you risk that?" Jonah thought about Nora, about the way she had looked at Serena this morning, about the small kindnesses that made a life worth living. "Because some things are worth risking everything for," he said, "and giving someone the chance to choose their own life seems like one of them." Serena made her decision the next morning. She called her father from Jonah's kitchen using a phone Jonah had bought with cash from a convenience store. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, she set the phone down with hands that were shaking again. "I told him, I am not coming back," she said. "I told him he can remove me from the company. He can take my shares. He can tell the press whatever story he wants. But I am not marrying Harrison Vale, and I am not going to be controlled anymore." Jonah nodded slowly. "What did he say?" She laughed, a hollow sound. "He said I was dead to him, that I had destroyed everything our family built, that he would make sure I never worked in business again." She looked up at the ceiling, blinked back tears. Then he hung up. "My father, who I have spent my entire life trying to please, ended our relationship in under 4 minutes." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I thought it would hurt more." "It will," Jonah said gently. Later, when it really sinks in, she nodded. "I know." The aftermath came quickly. Within 48 hours, Serena Lockwood's name was everywhere. The tabloids had pictures of her fleeing the wedding, speculation about where she had gone, analysis of what her disappearance meant for the Lockwood empire. Harrison Vale gave an interview in which he described himself as heartbroken and confused. Though Jonah suspected, the confusion was more about the business deal falling through than any romantic disappointment. Edmund Lockwood released a statement expressing concern for his daughter's mental state and asking the public to respect the family's privacy. No one seemed to know where she was. Jonah's name never appeared in any of the coverage, which meant either the Lockwoods were protecting him or they were planning something worse. His life contracted quickly. The wedding company fired him by email. 2 other driving services he had worked with declined to return his calls. His bank account, never robust, began to dwindle. The bills kept coming, but the income had stopped. Serena watched it happen with growing guilt. "Let me help," she said one evening. "I still have access to some accounts. They have not frozen yet. I can at least cover expenses until you find new work." Jonah shook his head. "That is not how this works." "How? What works? Whatever this is." "I would rather figure this out on my own." Serena was quiet for a moment. "You are the strangest person I have ever met," she said finally. "I will take that as a compliment." "It is." Nora came home from school that afternoon with a drawing she had made. It showed 3 stick figures standing in front of a house, one tall with brown hair, one tall with yellow hair, one small with pigtails. The sun was shining in the corner, and there were flowers in the yard that did not exist in real life. "That is us," she explained proudly. "Our family?" Serena looked at the drawing for a long time. "Your family?" she asked softly. Nora nodded with the certainty of a child who has not learned to doubt her own perceptions. "You live here now. That means you are family. That is how it works." Later, after Nora had gone to bed, Serena found Jonah in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes. "She called me family," she said. "I heard. Is that okay?" Jonah turned off the water, dried his hands on a towel. "Nora decides who her family is," he said. "I gave up trying to control that a long time ago." He paused. "But for what it is worth, I think she has good instincts." Serena leaned against the counter, watching him. "I never had this," she said quietly. "Growing up, I mean. Dinners at a kitchen table, drawings on the refrigerator, someone asking about my day. We had staff for all of that. Professional people doing professional jobs. That sounds lonely." It was. She crossed her arms. "I did not realize how lonely until I came here. The weeks that followed were a kind of education. Serena learned how to grocery shop on a budget, how to cook simple meals without burning anything, how to do laundry without ruining everything. She learned the rhythms of a small household, the morning rush to get Nora ready for school, the quiet afternoons when the house felt too big, the evenings when they all sat together and talked about nothing important. Jonah found work driving for a rideshare service, something anonymous and unglamorous that paid the bills. He came home tired most nights, but he always made time for dinner, always asked Nora about her day, always included Serena in the conversation like she had always been there. They did not talk about feelings. They did not make declarations or promises. They just lived day by day building something neither of them had a name for, but it was real. That was the thing Serena kept coming back to. For the first time in her life, she was living something real. The truce came unexpectedly. Lucas Wren called one afternoon in late October, his voice different than it had been before, measured, almost respectful. "Mr. Lockwood would like to meet with Serena," he said. "In person, neutral territory." Jonah put the phone on speaker so Serena could hear. "Why?" "He has had time to reflect," Wren continued. "He is not happy about how things have unfolded, but he recognizes that his approach may have been counterproductive. He would like to discuss a path forward." Serena looked at Jonah. He nodded slightly. "I will meet him," she said. "But on my terms. And Jonah comes with me." There was a pause on the other end of the line that can be arranged. The meeting happened at a coffee shop in Hartford, the kind of place where no one would recognize Edmund Lockwood. He was waiting when they arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. He looked older than Serena remembered, smaller somehow. The power that had always seemed to radiate from him had dimmed, replaced by something that looked almost like exhaustion. "You look well," he said when she sat down across from him. "I am well." Edmund glanced at Jonah, who had taken a seat at the next table over. Close enough to hear, far enough to give them space. "The driver?" "His name is Jonah." Edmund nodded slowly. He seems like a decent man. From what Lucas tells me, he gave up quite a lot for you. He gave me a chance, Serena said. That is more than you ever did. The words hung in the air between them. Edmund did not argue. I have made mistakes, he said, finally. With you, with your mother, with all of it. He looked down at his coffee cup. I told myself I was building something for you, a legacy, a future. I did not realize I was building a cage. Serena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. What do you want, Father? I want to know my daughter. Edmund looked up at her. Not the A's, the person. He paused. I know I have not earned that right, but I am asking anyway. The conversation lasted 2 hours. They did not resolve everything. They did not even resolve most things. But they started talking, really talking, for the first time in years. They talked about her mother, who had died when Serena was 12. They talked about the pressure he had put on her and why. They talked about what family meant and what it could mean if they tried again. When it was over, Edmund shook Jonah's hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking care of her. I did not take care of her, Jonah replied. She took care of herself. Edmund nodded, and for just a moment something like respect flickered in his eyes. 6 months later, Serena started her own company. It was small, nothing like Lockwood Industries, just a consulting firm helping family businesses navigate succession without the dysfunction she had grown up with. She worked out of a rented office downtown, came home every evening to a house that had started to feel like hers. Jonah was still driving, though he had moved to a better service now, one that appreciated his experience and his reliability. He came home tired but satisfied, played with Nora in the backyard, made dinner while Serena told him about her day. They had never had a conversation about what they were to each other. They did not need to. Some things exist without being named. Some families form without anyone deciding they should. One evening in spring, Jonah pulled into the driveway to find Serena sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I was thinking about that day, she said. When I got in your car, what about it? I did not know you. I did not know anything about you. But when you started driving, I felt safe for the first time in years. She turned to look at him. I still do not know why. Jonah was quiet for a moment. I think sometimes safety is not about knowing, he said. It is about trusting. You trusted me before you had any reason to, and you trusted me. I did. They sat there in the gathering dusk, watching the last light fade from the sky. Nora was inside working on her homework, singing softly to herself the way she did when she was concentrating. I love this life, Serena said quietly. This small, ordinary, completely improbable life. So do I. She took his hand, and he let her. The next morning, Jonah drove to work like he always did. The car was the same one he had been driving for years. Though he had finally gotten the dent in the back bumper fixed, there were no flowers on the hood, no ribbons on the antenna, no evidence that it had ever been anything other than what it was. A simple car for a simple life. But sometimes, when the light hit it just right, Jonah could still see Serena in the rearview mirror, wearing a wedding dress and asking for help. He could still feel that moment of decision, the split second when he chose to drive. He had not known then where the road would lead. He still did not know. Not really. That was the thing about choices. They took you somewhere new, and you only found out later if it was somewhere good. He merged onto the highway, headed toward his first pickup of the day. The sun was rising over the hills to the east, and the road stretched out ahead of him, full of possibilities. Serena would be at her office by now, starting her day, building something of her own. Nora would be at school learning whatever second graders learned, probably making another drawing to add to the collection on the refrigerator. Tonight, they would all be together again. 3 people who had found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. The car moved forward through the morning light, carrying nothing but potential. There was a time not so long ago when Jonah believed his life had already been written. He would drive until he could not drive anymore. He would raise his daughter in that small house. He would grow old, alone, content, but never quite fulfilled. That was the story he had accepted, the story he had stopped trying to change. Then Serena Lockwood opened the back door of his car, and everything shifted. He thought about that sometimes, about how a single moment could redirect an entire life, how a stranger's desperation could become the beginning of something neither of them expected, how courage, real courage, was not about being unafraid, but about acting despite the fear. Serena had taught him that, or maybe she had just reminded him of something he had always known, but forgotten along the way. The highway curved ahead, and Jonah followed it, his hands easy on the wheel. In a few hours, he would pick up passengers he had never met, take them where they needed to go, then drive home to a house that was fuller than it used to be. The routine had not changed much, but everything else had. He smiled just slightly and kept driving. Some roads lead exactly where you expect them to. Others take you somewhere you never imagined, somewhere you did not know you needed to go until you arrived. Jonah Whittaker had learned to trust the road, and so far it had not let him.